Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. I'm Perryn Keys. I'm the executive sports editor, rejoined today by Wilson Alexander, who's back from his travels abroad. Wilson, of course, is our lead LSU football beat reporter, and by Scott Rabalais, our venerable longtime columnist. Gentlemen, welcome in for the last show before not only Thanksgiving, and happy Thanksgiving to you two lads, but also the last show before LSU's final game of the regular season, Texas A&M, 11 a.m. Saturday in Tiger Stadium. How y'all doing?
Good. Thank you. Welcome back, my friend, to the show that never ends.
Well, thank you for having me again. I'm glad I could regain entrance into the studio. Couple things. One, happy Thanksgiving. I'm very much looking forward to Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. It's the best food holiday, in my humble opinion.
It is.
And then for those watching on YouTube, sorry, I didn't realize I was wearing Texas A&M colors. I completely forgot this was maroon.
You're just coming back off a vacation, so we'll let it, you get a half a pass for one show. It'll be okay. So a bit of business at the top of the show, as always, gentlemen. If you're watching this, you already know that the Advocate is the #1 destination for LSU football coverage and LSU sports coverage, for that matter. Please subscribe to the Advocate. That way, you stay up to date on everything. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. And get a hold of our LSU newsletter. That's a daily newsletter, but Rav handles that 3 times a week personally. So stay up to date that way as well. Get everything delivered straight to your inbox. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are typically here on this fine podcast every Monday and Thursday. We're coming to you on Wednesday, obviously, to get ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. So, but generally speaking, please check us out every Monday and Thursday. You can do that on all our social channels, on our YouTube channels, specifically the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. We're there live, and you can catch us after the fact if you don't catch us live. You can find us also on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever the finer podcasts are found. As we've mentioned, obviously the holidays are here, and so therefore it's a good time to do some shopping. And what better place to do some shopping for the LSU fan in your life, or maybe yourself? You'd like to get yourself some extra presents for the holidays. You can get some championship posters, Advocate championship posters. These things are iconic. They're all over every doctor's office, every restaurant you've probably been in somewhere here across South Louisiana, maybe even coast to coast. You can find all these posters. They're for sale at store.theadvocate.com. Again, that's store.theadvocate.com. If you enter the coupon code INSIDER, INSIDER, you get 15% off of your purchase. So by all means, check that out. Check out that deal. It's worth your trouble. Obviously, a great gift, as I said, for the Tiger fan in your life. We are brought to you today and every day by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL, financial member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. But to find out more, go to championwealthstrategies.com. Again, that's championwealthstrategies.com. Go to Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, I don't mind telling you guys that it's simultaneously one of my favorite weeks of the year, and also it's a sort of a sad moment, because this is one of the best weekends for college football, maybe the best weekend for college football in general. All the rivalries, the pennant chases, so to speak, are wrapping up, and so high stakes across the board. And then it's all over. Aside from the championship weekend, the following weekend, of course, if your team is not in the championship weekend, it sort of loses a little bit of its luster. So anyway, we've got plenty to get into here. Texas A&M and LSU, they will get underway at 11 a.m. Saturday in Tiger Stadium on ESPN. LSU is a 10.5-point favorite. The over-under is 66.5. And, of course, let's not bury the lead. The lead, of course, and will be for the next 2 weeks at least, if not the next 3 weeks, one Jayden Daniels, Heisman Trophy front runner now. If you're going by the odds makers, he he started, if I'm not mistaken, last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, he was third in the running. Bo Nix was minus 110. Michael Penix was plus 290. Jayden Daniels was plus 425. This Sunday, Jayden Daniels had moved ahead, which surprised me, as we discussed on Monday. Surprised me a good bit because Bo Nix did have a great game against Arizona State, 6 touchdown passes. Anyway, Jayden Daniels is minus 120. Bo Nix was plus 150. Michael Penix was plus 600 as of Sunday. As of this podcast, a little bit later in the week, Jayden Daniels is now minus 125. Bo Nix is plus 140, and Michael Penix is fallen back to plus 650. Of course, the question of the day, and I'll put this to you, Rab, first, and then let Wilson sort of piggyback. What does Jayden Daniels have to do on Saturday against Texas A&M, given that this is his last case for the Heisman Trophy, and Michael Penix and Bo Nix are probably going to get 2 shots with the Pac-12 championship game coming up next week?
Yeah, he has to be as impressive as possible again. Like, we've gone from the Alabama game where he was injured and he came out and everyone thought his chances were over, to coming off the board even with these Heisman odds that we've talked about, to now being the front runner in several sports books. I looked at 5 of them yesterday. He was in front in 4 of them. But he's this is his last shot against arguably the best defense they're going to play. So a chance to impress if the voters really pay attention and notice that he has a good game. And it's also a chance that he could struggle. I mean, against a team like Texas A&M, which, like I said, is a very good. That's their best thing, is their defense. So it's another kind of risk reward kind of day for Jayden. And but he's got to leave a great lasting impression that's got to linger on for a couple of weeks as the Heisman voters. We have 1 week to vote. Basically, the balloting opens November 27th and it closes Monday the 4th after the conference championship weekend, and so that's it. So, like you said, he will be sitting in the clubhouse. Will he be the clubhouse leader? Yeah, that remains to be seen. But he's got to do something that creates a lasting impression in the voters' minds through the championship weekend, when most people are likely to wait to vote.
It's
Wilson?
He only has this one chance left, like you said, but this is kind of the perfect, even though Texas A&M is 7-4, this is a great opportunity for him to make that lasting impression because of the quality of this defense. If Jayden goes out there and has another 400-plus yard game, throws multiple touchdowns, or in his case, just scores, for another 3 or 4 touchdowns, that could give him a chance to have that kind of lasting impression, which is exactly like what you said, what he has to be able to do. The stat line needs to be maybe not what he's done the last 2 weeks, where he's scored 13 total touchdowns and over 1,000 total yards by himself in over 2 games, but at least in that sort of probably 400 total yard range with another 3 or 4 scores. Because doing that against this Texas A&M defense, for people who I think really watch football and aren't just maybe looking at the records, that should go a long way. This Texas A&M front, I mean, they've got 94 tackles for loss and 40 sacks this season. That's top 3 in the country. In both of those categories. It's a team that creates a lot of negative plays. And if Jayden can avoid those kinds of things, continue to be explosive downfield as a passer, and electric as a runner, and just continue that in some respect against one of the best defenses, like you said, that he's played, then that could have that lasting effect, because he's had good games against, in terms of statistically, against the 2 other best defenses that LSU has played, which are Florida State and Alabama. But, he didn't get to finish the Alabama game because of the concussion. And Florida State, when you look back on it, was kind of his worst game of the year. I mean, obviously, that's a long way ago, but it's something that he, in this game, can really show against yet one of the best defenses that LSU has played, continue to play at a high level. That'll at least bolster his case and give him the best chance to win.
And I will say, too, it's not just the numbers. It's, as I continue to say, it's capturing the imagination of the voters. And it would really help him. And, of course, you can't plan these things. You can't try to do it. If he had some kind of exciting play that's going to be in the highlights,
where he catches a pass like Eric Crouch.
Well, they wanted to pass to him down in the goal line Saturday. They kind of set up a play where he was going to catch a pass, and it didn't happen. Maybe they'll try that again. I mean, you tried it against Georgia State. Maybe you don't try it against Texas A&M, but still. But like to what Wilson said, just maybe eluding a pass rush, and it looks like they got him, and he slips away and he runs for 30 yards or something like that. Something like that would go a long way. And like I said, you can't plan, you can't script these things or anything like that. But it would be, if there was some kind of organic, exciting play that will live on in the highlights all day Saturday, because LSU's got this 11 a.m. game all day Saturday and through the following weekend. As people are every time people are talking about the Heisman Trophy, every time ESPN's talking about the candidates and they show that play, that would help him as well. And can it happen? I don't know, but we'll see.
Well, he's done it time and again this season. There's
a good chance
one
more time.
Yeah, one more of those signature moments, because like you said, you need a moment, and Nicholls is going to have a chance this weekend and could have another chance in the Pac-12 championship game, although Oregon hasn't wrapped that up yet. And then Penix certainly will, have a chance to have one of those signature moments on championship weekend that Jayden won't have. So like you said, something like that run against Florida, either of the runs against Florida, like do that again, or some sort of spectacular throw on the run like against Army, but against an even more quality opponent in Texas A&M would certainly go a long way.
You bring up Texas A&M. I think it's interesting. I mean, you're spot on. This is a really, really good defense, and we can get into the numbers here about Texas A&M. 16th in the nation against the pass, 184.1 yards per game. 16th in the nation versus the run, 102.4 yards per game. This is sort of leads into a question about the voters, and this is maybe where I lean on you, Rev, since you've been a Heisman voter since 1997. You kind of have the best feel for the room, so to speak, maybe of the three of us. How many voters do you suppose are really paying attention and know that Texas A&M has maybe the best defense that he will have faced all year? And how many of them are just sort of, and Texas A&M, they fired their coach. It's lame duck season and all that sort of. And they're not really doing their homework. And really that leads to the question, which is, in your suspicion, are voters paying it to how many of the Heisman voters, the 900 plus voters, are really taking this thing as seriously as you would like them to, in your estimation? I understand it's kind of a wild guess.
No, I understand what you're saying. And just to give you a rough estimate, half and half. I think this is shaping up to be a closer vote, a closer result that we end up with, and we won't know, of course, till that night, on December 9th. But it's shaping to be a closer race with at least Jayden and Nicholls at this point. Maybe Jayden, Nicholls, and Daniels. Doesn't seem like it's anybody else really. So yeah, maybe more voters are going to be looking for something a little more dividing. I if I may digress a little bit, when we talk about the Biletnikoff Award later, I got a vote on the Biletnikoff Award also for receivers, and they sent a nice stat package out, which is showing each not only overall stats for each receiver, but their stats against ranked teams. And I'm trying to, I voted for Malik Nabers number one, but I was trying to discern between 2 and 3, and really looking at the numbers and looking at those numbers, and the Heisman, the blessing and the curse of the Heisman is they don't give you finalists. They didn't say choose from. The Biletnikoff people said choose from these 10 for the 3 finalists, and for the 3 finalists to pick your winner. They don't do that. It's whoever you want to vote for. And we can, you could vote for Brock Bowers at Georgia, which is a good player. You can say, oh, maybe he's the best player in the country. But you could just as well vote for a linebacker at Kansas who's on the second string. It doesn't really matter, and they don't really give you stats or guidelines. You got to go find it. So you're depending on a lot of voters to be discerning and really do their homework. And we all have jobs. We all are covering teams. We're all in the media, except for the former champions, former winners who also get a vote. And then, of course, there's the one fan vote. Everybody's trying to pad the stats. I always love to see how that comes out. But yeah, I think maybe a few more are going to pay attention to those kind of things this year. But you can't count on that to carry the day. Put it that way. We
are obviously looking at Jayden Daniels up close, farther close. Is that a correct term? Right. Well, we're looking at Jayden Daniels closer than we are than we are the other 2 candidates. But I think we would all 3 agree that certainly who has had the best season among the 3. I mean, the passing stats are basically a wash. They're all within a couple hundred yards of each other, and it's the rushing stats that just are mind-boggling.
It's also, yes, in terms of overall stats, like Penix leads the country in passing yards. And Nicholls leads the country in completion percentage. Mm-hmm. But the efficiency and the explosiveness with which Jayden has thrown the ball outpaces both of them. And then you add on the rushing stats on top of that too. I feel like if you were even just going purely as a passer, yeah, it would be really even. Like you said, the rushing is what separates him. But even those passing numbers, like Jayden's yards per attempt this year is 11.8.
That's
and Penix,
wild.
Which is just incredible. I
Wild.
think out of all the things of this season, I know we've talked about before, but that's the thing that to me is just the most impressive.
I know this is in your head. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what was his yards per attempt last year? Because it was his lowest of his career.
7.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
It's a huge discrepancy.
it's just incredible. And like, and just the way that, just as a quick tangent, like the way that he's like developed in that regard, but still continued to be effective as a runner, gotten probably better as a runner, but like blended it together so that the running isn't like a sign of him not being able to throw the ball downfield like it was last year. It's not a hindrance or a crutch in any way.
Right.
It's just an added addition. It's fantastic to watch him play. Penix and Nicks, their yards per attempt are both in the 9s, which is good, but Jayden's a full 2 yards ahead of both of them. And so it's like in his also his passer ratings like what 207, 208 in that range.
It's miles ahead of anybody else.
Yeah, it's like could break an NCAA record. And so like yes, even though there's some like on the surface their passing numbers look like pretty comparable, Jayden's been much more efficient and explosive.
One of the things that's been, as you might suspect, you sort of see the back and forth of this, which is, hey, my goodness, look what Jayden Daniels did against Georgia State, 8 touchdowns, buffered by the counter argument, which is, hey, he did it against Georgia State and they kind of left him in a couple extra series so he could pad his stats and so forth. All that's true. But in addition to all the stats you gave just now, Wilson, Jayden Daniels has thrown 91 fewer pass attempts than the other 2 quarterbacks. So think about it. He has basically accumulated the same yardage totals and completion percent, all that kind of stuff, in addition to his rushing totals, in addition to the fact that he has done this on fewer attempts, which I think says everything about, well, hey, he stayed in the game too long. He's been out there padding stats. First of all, we can get into strength of schedule too. LSU's strength of schedule, I believe, is 10th in the nation. And I don't remember what Washington's and Oregon's are, but they're somewhere in the 50s and 60s. So
going to get better with these last 2 games, but maybe not good enough to be
right. So I mean, to me, I just bring all this up to say, again, it seems like it ought to come down to if voters are well educated and they're taking this job seriously and doing their homework when they go to cast their votes, versus how many of them are just sort of checking out SportsCenter and kind of mailing it in. On that topic, this is one of the reasons why we think, not only because of the odds and just sort of the way the Heisman race goes, this may be one of the closest races ever. Rab, it's certainly shaping up to be, and that's where I had you do some homework.
I just so happen to have some numbers here.
What do you have for us? I was wrong because I thought Bo Jackson and Chuck Long were actually the tightest race. Yeah.
I did too, but it was the standard for the longest time.
Right.
But there have been 10 Heisman races decided by 77 points or less, with a lot of varying point totals over the years. But the closest race ever was just a few years ago, and it was Mark Ingram. When he was at Alabama, beating Toby Gerhart, who was also a running back from Stanford, by 28 points, 1304 to 1276. Bo Jackson, you would have thought would have been a runaway, but Chuck Long was a very highly regarded quarterback in 1985.
Iowa could use a quarterback like him right about now.
They don't have a Chuck Long these days. That was 45 points. And so Ernie Davis beat a running back named Bob Ferguson. Ever heard of Bob Ferguson?
I was looking it up yesterday, and I had never heard of him too.
I'd never heard of Bob
State.
Ferguson, but Ernie Davis, of course, was very famous. The running back from Syracuse.
You don't ever remember who came in second.
No, yeah, that's
not
a good
too
point.
often.
Except for Rab, who's got a stat on 1962. Do you not?
One of the closest races ever, not the top 10, but 1962. Terry Baker, the quarterback at Oregon State, beat out Jerry Stovall, who was LSU's all-around player, running back, kick returner, defensive back, by 89 points. And the story we were talking before the show started, the little anecdote about that is compared to today with the Heisman finalists and who's being invited to New York, they pulled Terry Baker out of class in Oregon State, say, hey, you won the Heisman Trophy. Yeah, congratulations.
Oh, great. I got to get back to class now.
Well, people, have you ever seen the famous John Cappelletti speech in 1974? I think?
I have. I know I have, but it's been a long time.
And they made a movie about it. His younger brother, Joey, I think, was dying of leukemia, and he gave just this heart-rending speech. It had everyone in tears. He was the only one there. It was a big banquet, and they weren't finalists. They didn't start doing the finalist thing till the 80s. And so it was just him, and it was just, there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
When they finally did the show, I do remember this because I'm of a certain age, as are you, Rab. It was a half-hour show on CBS, and it was like, I don't know, right before the Army-Navy game or something like that. Isn't that right? And now it's as we remember from the Joe Burrow ceremony, it was 57 minutes of blah, 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 followed by three very compelling minutes at the end.
Going back to this is, and how the voters will scrutinize and stuff like that. This is a much different situation from 4 years ago.
Oh,
I mean, Joe was, people tried to, occasionally you see some talking heads on ESPN try to drum up some possibility. Could someone else besides? No one besides Joe was going to. You just knew it.
He wrapped it up in the Bama game.
Yeah, in early November he had it, and he just kind of added a little cherry on top with his running around to Georgia and hitting the touchdown pass and the long pass in the SEC championship game, and he won by the biggest landslide in Heisman history. This is not going to be that for whoever wins, whether it's Jayden or Bo or Michael Penix. So. That's what makes it all the more exciting, more fun for us to talk about.
One other thing for us to talk about
real quick as an aside, just about this week. It isn't a kind of I don't have appropriate word, but I think it's nice that Jayden's going to have this last game at home. Remember when Joe he came out in the
100%.
Burrow jersey with the AUX and he went over to the student section and applauded them after the game and stuff. I don't know if any of that's going to happen with Jayden, but it's nice that he could have the opportunity to kind of have a moment in Tiger Stadium one more time to kind of cap off this whole campaign.
Which I think is going to sort of, this just in, the LSU fan base is not wild about these early morning 11 a.m. kickoffs. I guess we're going to find out on Saturday, but I would think that it would be safe to assume that had this been just sort of an average Texas A&M at LSU, regular season finale with neither team having, a stake in the West race or something like that, and maybe you show up, maybe you don't. My guess is that the fans are going to be out in force. They might be a little late getting into the stadium, but they're going to do everything they can to make it before kickoff.
I hope so.
Because they do want to give. I would think that they want to give this guy, the sort of the ride out of the door that he's.
I would say to fans, if you haven't seen them play this year, you're going to want to say one day, I saw this guy play in person. Just like you did Joe Burrow, 4 years ago. So if you have a chance to get a ticket, if you maybe haven't been to a game, maybe you come all year. Yeah, get up early. Come to Tiger Stadium, 11 o'clock. We all think that stinks. I mean, they're excited about it. The Michigan and Ohio State fans are excited about the kickoff at the same time.
They like that, though.
Yeah, they do. We're not down here. People would rather all day to get ready for the game. But make the effort because you're going to want to say that you saw this guy play in person
all day
one
to
more time.
Get ready for the game, huh?
That's a good way of putting it.
Exactly.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Well, I was about to mention, as we said, one other race that we have our eyes on, and that of course is the Biletnikoff Award. Wilson, while you were out, Rab and myself and Reed Darcy all discussed for 2 shows in a row actually that we first thought that this thing was in the bag for Marvin Harrison Jr. And after Saturday, he's probably still the prohibitive favorite, but he had 30 yards receiving, and Malik Nabers against pretty suspect competition, I understand, but he had 140 yards. That puts him, I believe, at 330 some odd yards ahead of Marvin Harrison in terms of season totals. The obvious question is, can Malik Nabers actually make up some kind of ground if he does, he have an exceptional game against Texas A&M, while Marvin Harrison is duking it. He's going to have a huge stage going against Michigan and, the biggest or one of the biggest games of the year for college football. So he'll have every opportunity to win it and clinch it, Marvin Harrison. But let's say he goes out against the number 1 or number 2 ranked defense and against the pass in Michigan. Michigan's either number 1 or number 2 against the pass. And if he goes out and has, as I say, 2 catches for 19 yards or something, is it game on? Is it game back on for the Biletnikoff race?
I feel like it's still game on right now. Maybe it's me imagining something, but I just, you look at the numbers and like Brian Kelly kept saying yesterday, and Malik probably should win it if you're just going off of that in production this season. And that's not to discredit Marvin Harrison really, because he's a fantastic talent, and he's going to be probably an awesome pro. And but when you look at it, he's got 3 games where he's had 30 yards this season. That hasn't happened to Malik. The 3 down-ish games that he had were around 80 yards receiving this year. And every other game he's been over 100. And he has a chance to be LSU's all-time leading receiver if he has a particularly big game against A&M. And so he, I guess that would, though, maybe narrow the gap even further if Marvin Harrison doesn't, have a big game. If he does go for 140 and 2 touchdowns and has some acrobatic catches and they beat Michigan, then yeah, he's probably going to win it. And maybe he even ends up in New York, partly because though of kind of name recognition and the career that he's had. He's kind of gotten himself to that place. But this should definitely be close. And it's been interesting hearing Brian Kelly stump for Malik yesterday in particular. I mean, he said it sort of softly in the press conference, then on his radio show was much more blatant about it. He said, you can't give it to Marvin Harrison because if you're looking at the numbers, because he's had 3 games with less than 50 yards. And he's that's Kelly stumping for his players. I have no problem with that. Of course. But, he's got a point.
Some of those, you mentioned some of those quote unquote season lows for Malik Nabers, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 yards. It's probably noteworthy that maybe he quote unquote only has 80 yards. Part of that may be because, defenses are bracketing him. And look, hey, there goes Brian Thomas open down the seam. It's easy to forget that Brian Thomas could very easily, and he is a semifinalist for the Biletnikoff.
LSU's the only school with 2 receivers who are semifinalists.
Yeah,
final 10.
It says everything about those 2 guys together.
I mean, look, think about I don't know if we want to go all the way through into this tangent. Maybe we save it for another day. But, I mean, the pairing of those 2. Yeah. You think about the receiver pairings in LSU history, OBJ and Jarvis Landry and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. These 2 are right up there with them now.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the club, really sure.
They're
100%.
They are in that fully in that echelon, and I mean it's in that tier, and it's been incredible what they've been able to do this season. Like you said, play off of each other and complement one another in order to get the best out of what they can both do. Because teams have tried to bracket Malik or double cover him, and it opens things up for Brian, and then they have to try to scramble to cover Brian. Okay, well now Malik's wide open, so it's been awesome the way they've complemented each other, and they're now one of the best receiving duos in LSU history.
I tell you, voting for the 3 Biletnikoff finalists, and then the final voting is still to come. Yesterday on Monday, I was like, man, it's no contest to me that Malik is number 1. And then I put Harrison third behind I want to say his name right, Rome Odunze.
Yes, from Washington.
From Washington.
Yeah,
who's also had an excellent season. But Harrison's he looks the part, and you just. I think people just think he's the best player, the best receiver, maybe a Heisman finalist as well, one of the 4. But the numbers just speak, especially with having to share the field with Brian Thomas, who's also a 1,000-yard receiver.
Marvin Harrison, Marvin Harrison, we've said it before, has name recognition. He's got
helps to be named Marvin Harrison.
Sure, but I mean, he has earned his own name recognition in addition to that, and has been projected as a first-round prospect basically since before the season began, maybe even during last year at some point. Malik Nabers is now certainly a projected first-round pick. Brian Thomas, I think, is probably a projected second-round pick, but I happen to think that he's going to have he's part of the all-airport team, right? He looks the part. He looks like an NFL wide receiver.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that Malik doesn't look like one, but Malik is sort of the complete package, maybe not as tall, but he's also, the scouts are going to fall in love with this guy, from the first 5 seconds they start talking to him about football. And Brian Thomas is going to have every chance to work his way into the first round.
And I think some voters get caught up in that. I personally never wanted to care about what his NFL potential is, this or that. Doug Flutie was a great
JT Barrett was a Heisman finalist and, was undrafted. Right. Look, you're either a great college player or you're not. It's not supposed to come in, your future as a pro, your potential future as a pro is not supposed to come into the mix. This is the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. We are here typically here every Monday and Thursday. We are here coming to you on Wednesday, of course, to get in front of the holiday. But we're here every Monday and Thursday. Otherwise, on all our social channels, all our YouTube channels, specifically the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com channel. You can catch us live there, or you can catch us after the fact on that same channel. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. And please subscribe, not only to our YouTube channel, but also to The Advocate. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. And as Rab and I have been discussing with Reed in previous podcasts, we're not only in the business of covering LSU football, we're covering LSU women's basketball and everything associated with it lately, in addition to LSU baseball, LSU men's basketball, gymnastics, softball, everything else that's coming up, here on the sports season. So to stay up, to stay up to date, you can sign up for our LSU newsletter. Please do. You can do that at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are brought to you today by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, please go to championwealthstrategies.com. Again, that's championwealthstrategies.com. And as we were saying earlier in this podcast, it's gift giving season, it's shopping season, holiday season. So check out store.theadvocate.com to get yourself some LSU championship posters. These things are iconic. Obviously, the Advocate front page from the day after LSU has won its many national championships, particularly as of late. So go to store.theadvocate.com, and if you use the keyword insider, you can get 15% off of your purchase right now. I wanted to, we're going to slightly shift the focus to this actual game here on Saturday and Texas A&M, because they're coming in and they're a little bit more interesting than just the average, the recent Texas A&M teams of the Jimbo Fisher era that are coming in, staring down the barrel of another 8-4 season. And in last year's case, there wasn't even 8-4. So, but Jimbo Fisher, of course, is no longer. Elijah Washington, the interim coach. Elijah Robinson, the interim coach. And they're coming in here 7-4. And it begs the question, Rab, you've seen many situations like this, but I will ask Wilson first. Do you suspect that Texas A&M will come in here inspired or uninspired? Are they going to be coming in here fired up to get a pound of flesh and finish off their season with a bang, the regular season with a bang? Or are they more likely to just sort of go through the motions?
It's so hard to say. Someone asked Brian Kelly that kind of very thing in his press conference Monday, and he said basically that he doesn't put any stock into it because you don't really know what's coming. You have to focus on yourself in order to prepare and do everything you need to do. Because if you do catch yourself trying to maybe think like, oh, well, maybe they won't be inspired, then you don't prepare properly, and then you get caught flat-footed and you get beat. So my basic answer is I don't know, because I'm not in that, because we're not in that locker room,
Sure.
and it's hard to tell. They've had one game now without Jimbo. It was against Abilene Christian, and so it's not really an indicator of anything. But I guess my hunch would be, if I had to sort of put really a more firm answer on it, is that they will probably come in here, trying to win. I don't think they're going to be fully checked out. They've still got guys like Moose Muhammad and Evan Stewart and that defensive front that we talked about, and their quarterback situation is a little bit up in the air right now with Max Johnson day to day, but Max is the kind of person who's going to want to play and finish this thing out, even though he's dealing with cracked ribs. And when you've got that at the quarterback position, that's a good thing to have, with somebody who's trying to lead you and come back and get back into this game, even though it does not mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things for Texas A&M. So I think they will, but I think LSU's probably got even a little bit more motivation than Texas A&M does, especially after losing last year. Brian Kelly said it himself, there's some guys in the locker room that still remember what that was like and had that taste in their mouth. And to now be able to maybe avenge that at home bodes well for LSU.
I think Texas A&M, I could expect them trying to get in their heads, which we don't know, but come out with some fire and some desire to try to, upset LSU's season, whatever it is, certain upset Jayden Daniels Heisman hopes. But if LSU can get up on them and hit some big plays and get up a couple of scores on them, I think they could check out. So that did not happen in the game last year.
No, it did
College
not.
Station. They got A&M got some early momentum and had LSU playing from behind the whole time. And they just built for A&M, and it was their season. They will go to a bowl game after this. Last year they were 5-7. They weren't going anywhere, but they have 7 wins. They're going to a bowl game somewhere. So this is not the end of their season this time. So I think for all those factors and the fact that they're playing in Baton Rouge instead of College Station, that bodes well for LSU. But as Brian said, you can't count on it. You can't expect it. And college football is such an emotional game. If they get a turnover or something like that, then and a scoop and score, things could turn their way. And Max Johnson plays, and he wants to come back and show people what he's got in Tiger Stadium. All those things. Yeah, it could be a tougher day for LSU. But I think if LSU can But the offense, they scored several games in a row. The first touchdown of the half and the first touchdown of the second half. They can do that, then that bodes well for them psychologically in the game.
Max Johnson, it's funny we don't know whether Max Johnson will start or Jalen Henderson, who started the last couple of games. We don't know which of those two A&M quarterbacks will play. Max Johnson has led upset victories in this series for the past 2 years. First for LSU over Texas A&M, and then last year for Texas A&M against LSU.
Last year was Connor Wegman, wasn't it, at A&M?
You know what? You are absolutely right. I am mistaken. Yeah, Wegman and A&M, they jumped all over those guys early on.
Next thing you know, had a huge game.
That's right. Next thing you know, they ran wild. Next thing you know, LSU is on the losing end of a 38-23 ball game. Is still in the playoff talk, at least in the discussion, in the periphery of the playoff talk going into that
number
game.
5,
laid an egg. Yeah,
I mean, it seemed kind of weird at the time that they were number 5, but it was a possibility.
Sure,
it was there on the table. If they had won that game and then maybe somehow upset Georgia, then there would have been a conversation about them being the first 2-loss team in the playoffs.
Texas A&M, incidentally, over the past 4 games, the knock on them, well earned, certainly in the early part of the season, is that they were very, just very average to below average on offense. They've averaged 38.5 points a game the past 4 games. And I understand the last game was against Abilene Christian, but they did that in 3 other games as well. So, discount them at your own peril, I think, if you're LSU. And it's funny. We brought up Jimbo Fisher. Rab, you've got a column that's up at theadvocate.com about just sort of Texas A&M never really having been able to pull it together as a program, which is sort of mystifying given all the resources and the fertile recruiting base they've had, anything like that. Before we get to that, though, I did want to just stay on this for a second. Bobby Petrino is going to get a chance to presumably call the plays sort of uncuffed. Now that Jimbo is not going to handcuff him, and maybe Jimbo wasn't calling the plays, but he might have said, "Hey, Bobby, I want I formation. I want you to run it up the gut," or something to that effect. Throughout the season.
That's one of the knocks on Jimbo, that he was too cautious.
Exactly.
Offensively.
Right. Petrino was 2-2 against LSU when he was the coach at Arkansas. Of course, he lost with Lamar Jackson in that bowl game. They really did a great job. LSU did, holding down Lamar Jackson in Louisville in that 2016 Citrus Bowl in Orlando. But Petrino was 2-2 against LSU as the coach at Arkansas, and put up some big numbers in some of those games. They scored more than 30 points a game in 3 of those 4 games. Put up more than 400 yards in 2010 and won 31-23. I just bring all that up to say, is it crazy to think that maybe he gets to throw, Bobby Petrino specifically gets to throw caution to the wind and let it fly against a very, very suspect LSU defense?
Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I mean, you're 7-4. You're going to a middling bowl game. You don't have any championship aspirations. If you're Bobby Petrino, you don't have any aspirations. I wouldn't think of being the next head coach or staying on the staff. You're going to be looking for another job again. Why not? And certainly against an LSU team that's obviously been, as we may have said once or twice on this podcast, been suspect all year on defense. Open up the playbook. Go for it on 4th down in your own territory. That kind of thing. What does it matter? LSU's going to score.
Right.
You've got to score some points. Even if you got to be thinking of A&M going as, look, we have a good defense, but they're gonna get.
And if you're the right, I mean, if you
10 points,
if you're the A&M staff, you're not fearful about coaching for your job, and you're not fearful about hey, maybe the new guy will hire me. There's a real good chance that entire staff is going to get cleaned out, except for maybe 1 or 2 assistant coaches just to hold over to have some continuity. In a weird way, I was going to ask you this, Wilson, if this thing does get into become the proverbial barn burner. Doesn't that have the potential then to it actually sort of works in Jayden Daniels' favor?
Yeah, because he would have to stay in the game even longer, and then he has a chance to maybe have a moment near the end to win the game kind of thing. And it does in that case. If it also would mean that he's putting up points and yards on this Texas A&M defense that we talked about at the top of the pod about how much of a challenge it does pose. And so it does. It would work well for him in that way. Another example of LSU's defense not being able to do something and having to win because of Jayden's heroics, and so it probably would work in his favor in that regard if it ended up being in that case. But the Texas A&M it also, I like LSU's chances in same way it's been this way most of the season. I like LSU's chances in a high scoring game.
Mm-hmm.
Like if LSU is just more equipped offensively to win in that scenario than I think Texas A&M is because of Jayden and all these receivers. Texas A&M has got talent. They've recruited really well over the last few years, and that's why Jimbo's no longer there. He wasn't able to maximize the talent.
Right.
But they haven't been able to put it all together like LSU has on the offensive side this season.
It's weird, usually when a quarterback finds himself in this position in the Heisman race and he's got 3 losses, that pretty much disqualifies you. Now I wonder if that sort of hasn't turned, that the LSU's issues on defense and the 3 losses have sort of made, they've turned into a qualification almost for Jayden, because it sort of amplifies the point of, no, he really does have to be this good, and he really does have to play, all 4 quarters to give these guys any semblance of a shot in any of these games that they have either won or lost, for that matter. Rab, I did want to get back to just sort of Texas A&M and never having really been able to pull it together, save for a stretch there in the 80s and 90s where that was the wrecking crew, the vintage era of the wrecking crew defense, and R.C. Slocum, and before him Jackie Wayne Sherrill. What do you make out of the Texas A&M program? I still am of the opinion, and yes, they have stumbled over and over and over again, but I'm still of the opinion that, man, they just got to get one hire right, and once they do, if they do, a la Nick Saban at LSU, all bets are off, and now you're dealing with a big, huge gorilla 6 hours west of you from Baton Rouge.
Yes, in that scenario, it could be a difficult situation for LSU and other teams in the SEC. We've got Alabama on one side, and as I wrote in my column, I think Nick Saban, I'm starting to think he's related to Lestat from the Vampire Chronicles. He goes on as an immortal, And then on the West, this Colossus in Texas A&M. But they never seem to get it together. Yes, going back to the 80s and 90s, they had a stretch where they had from 85 to 98, they had 7-10 win seasons or more, a lot of Big 12 titles. But this is how long they've gone in some of these stretches. Last time they won the national championship,
1939.
Last time they were number 1 in the AP poll, November 1957.
Is that right? Really?
Yes, when Bear Bryant was the coach, before Mama called and he went back to Alabama. Last time they won a conference championship, 1998.
Yep.
Last time they went to the SEC championship game, 0. Yeah. So how many seasons with less than 4 losses have they had since winning that last Big 12 championship in 1998?
2. Is that right? Yeah, 2. Yeah.
And one of them was the COVID year, right?
Well, yeah, one of them was the 91 COVID year. Yeah,
the other one was Johnny Manziel when they caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, it was a Johnny Manziel year in 2012 when no one, including the people at A&M, knew that he was going to be that good. So it is the most mysterious program in college football, I think, because they have all the money, they have the facilities, they have the fan support. Kind of odd, but rabid fan support nonetheless.
It's a strange way of expressing their support. Yeah,
and they sit in obviously East Texas, where it is some of the most fertile recruiting ground in the country.
Brazos Valley, to be a little bit more accurate.
Yes,
all my friends from back in Southeast Texas who take issue with
that's more Central Texas.
Oh yes.
Okay, well to us it's East Texas, such a vast state, but okay, an hour and change away from metropolitan Houston, which is as many people as we know as all of Louisiana, and yet they have not been a championship program. They've not even been to the SEC championship game in more than a decade in the SEC. Why is that?
Yeah,
there are a lot of theories. Some things I came across with that. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen at Texas A&M. A lot of people with money means a lot of people want to have their say. And Eric Hyman, who was the athletic director before Scott Woodward at Texas A&M, told the Fort Worth paper one time that when they gave Kevin Sumlin a contract extension 10 years ago, he was handed the contract. Says this is what we're doing. He was told this is what we're doing. Arbo and Lofton used to be the president of Texas A&M. Said. Before Jimbo was fired, said he told the Athletic, if you ask Jimbo who his boss is, you might be surprised what his answer would be. Because
money talks, and the money people talk,
and money people don't just want to give their money; they want to have control. They want to have influence. They want to be able to say, "I did that. They're doing this because I said do that." And I think that's part of Texas' problem. It's almost an embarrassment of riches. That too much. That they have too much going for them, or too much. Too many resources, if that can be said. Like maybe they will. Maybe they'll hit on the right guy this time. Maybe it'll be Mike Elko, the coach at Duke, or maybe it'll be Deion Sanders. I don't think so. But I mean, people are there are people like Stephen A. Smith who are stumping for that. But just as I wrote in my column, just as likely as them finally getting their act together, they're going to come to Tiger Stadium 2 years from now with a similar record that they have this year, and everybody's still going, they're still trying to figure it out.
It's really interesting, and I just wrote this down just now. Remind me, gentlemen, both of you. We don't want to burn too much time getting into it here. This would be a great fodder for a topic for some future podcast, maybe in the off season, which is what are the best jobs in the nation, best coaching jobs, not the actual best coaches, but the best coaching jobs in the nation, and then the best potential jobs in the nation, which is to say a Texas A&M or maybe I don't know, maybe like a UCLA, which it just seems like it would be a untapped, unlimited potential in terms of what you could do there. I think that'd be fun to kick around, don't you think?
Give us some more time to think.
Oh no! Yeah, no. This is very much
interesting think piece.
This is very much a topic for the off season. Yeah. When we're scrounging for topics to talk about sometime in July. But it would be something interesting, I think, to get into. We will leave it there, though. For now, we will wrap up this podcast. We want to wish you guys all a happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate. Certainly, Wilson's going to celebrate. This is evidently your favorite thing. What's the best food item on the plate?
Sweet potato casserole.
Oh, right.
It does a brown sugar and pecan topping. None of that. No marshmallows.
Pecan topping.
Brown sugar and pecans. I look forward to it every year.
I told my mother she wasn't invited this year unless she brought the cornbread dressing.
Oh, well, that's fair.
No, I'm kidding. She was invited, but she is bringing the cornbread dressing.
I mean, hey, look, everything is a proposition. Not for nothing, but Mrs. Keys has dietary restrictions, so we have to have kind of some weird. She makes these fake mashed potatoes, with the rice cauliflower and everything. But it takes 20 steps or whatever. But once it's done and it's all loaded down with the cheese and green onions and whatnot and everything, it's worth the trouble. You'd be surprised. I'll put it to you like that. You'd be surprised. Right. She also makes a great cheesecake that doesn't have any sugar in it, which is magic or something. I don't know how that works. Anyway, to close it out, I did want to bring up a couple of more things just to close this thing out. This is obviously an LSU podcast, but 99.5% of the time we're going to talk about LSU. But did want to mention that Tulane's in the hunt for the American Conference Championship. They're going to play UTSA. Those teams are both undefeated in conference play, as is SMU. So Tulane needs to beat UTSA to get a spot in the American Conference Championship game. That's at 2:30 p.m. on ABC on Friday. UL has struggled pretty much, really the last month of the season. They're 2-5 in the Sun Belt. They're going to play ULM. They got to get bowl eligible. That's at 2 p.m. Saturday. Nicholls State, as you mentioned, Rab, in your column, is in the FCS playoffs again. That's a tremendous job by Tim Rebowe down there at Nicholls State, the longtime coach there. He gets the most out of what he's got, and a lot of times in terms of resources, it's not a lot. They play at 2 p.m. At Southern Illinois in the FCS playoffs
next year. I believe they come to Tiger
Stadium. I think that's right, because that's the last team last in-state team that LSU has not played. So LSU has played Southern and Grambling the last 2 years, and that the best rivalry in the state of Louisiana for college football, I would say.
Definitely one of the most entertaining.
If you've never been to the Bayou Classic, I strongly urge everybody to go at least once. I promise you will not go for only one time. You will go back. Southern and Grambling have not had a great year this year. They're both 5-5. Eric Dooley, of course, fired last week. He never quite got that program going. He was a Southernite, if ever there was one. He was a Grambling grad, but he spent 14 years as an assistant coach there. Came back, brought them to the SWAC championship game actually last year, where they lost to Deion Sanders and Jackson State. But they will have Terrence Graves as their interim coach going into that game. And Terrence Graves is uniquely qualified for that job because he was the interim coach at Grambling 2 years ago after Grambling fired Broderick Fobbs, and he won the thing. So they won that game 29-26. It was a great game. So best wishes to all those teams, not only the Bayou Classic, but Tulane and UL and Nicholls. And one other thing, I'm sorry to everybody, but I'm going to subject you to 30 seconds worth of Canadian football. Congratulations to the Montreal Alouettes, who won the Grey Cup against Winnipeg. They beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who were quarterbacked by Zach Collaros, who played for Brian Kelly. at Cincinnati. So but that was an upset. Montreal beat the best two teams in the CFL to wrap up the season. They beat Toronto, which was 16-2, and then beat Winnipeg, which has been really the best team in the CFL for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm sorry you guys had to sit through that
It's all
for
right.
45 seconds, but I love me some CFL.
Perryn is very proud of his Canadian heritage, So,
we had
is there anything
Thanksgiving.
like Thanksgiving?
We had
in Canada?
Thanksgiving a month ago. Yeah,
Yeah, there
so
is?
it's mid-October. Yeah, it's
mid-October,
mid-October.
okay.
So
It's a little cold in Canada about this time of year.
that's right. That's one of my favorite things. And I'm sorry, we'll wrap this up. But the Grey Cup, one of the great juxtapositions was Shania Twain singing halftime at the Super Bowl, with the bear midriff and everything, and then singing halftime at the Grey Cup one year. And she's just loaded down in the full fuzzy parka with the hood on and everything. So football is great wherever you watch it, I promise. And obviously you guys will probably be tuning in or sitting in Tiger Stadium at 11 a.m. Saturday for LSU and Texas A&M in the regular season. For now, we will be back Monday to discuss that and probably to discuss the Heisman race yet again. So we will be more than happy to do that. A reminder again, we are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, go to championwealthstrategies.com. We appreciate them being aboard, of course. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Subscribe to The Advocate, of course. You do that at theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Get a hold of our LSU newsletter. To do that, you get a hold of the LSU newsletter at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Again, that's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And finally, again, it's gift giving season, it's holiday season. So please head on over to the Advocate store. Go to store.theadvocate.com. Again, that's store.theadvocate.com. Enter the coupon code INSIDER, and you can get 15% off of your purchase. Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming along. And yes, indulging me with a little trip down across the state and then across North America. For Wilson Alexander and for Scott Rabalais, I am Perryn Keys. And for Robert Young behind the glass, happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.